Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ace the Interview Workshop, our featured workshop for the month of February for the spring 2025 semester. My name is Ashley Knuth, and I serve as a program coordinator on our Employer Engagement and Career Services, for short EECS team here at Pima Community College. And our team is here to support you as you transition from college to career. So whether you're preparing for your first job interview or to refine your professional skills, our team is here to provide guidance, resources, and the connections to help you succeed. So today's session is really all about building your confidence and developing the skills that you need to excel in interview spaces. So with that, we will go ahead and jump in here. But before we get started with our content today, I would like you all to take a moment to access the materials to ensure that you are prepared for our workshop. We will have some guided activities as part of our session today. So I highly encourage you have a copy of the student handbook in front of you, if that's available to you, whether it's digitally or maybe you're able to print a copy, as this will just make it easier for you to engage with some of the activities that we have embedded throughout our session today. So to access the materials that you'll need for this session, you can either scan the QR code that's up on the screen or follow tinyurl.com/YCXJ8EHR. Either way, those will both route you to our student materials folder, which lives within Google Drive. Once you are in the student materials folder, please click the folder titled Spring 2025 Workshop Materials. And within that folder, another folder will be titled Ace the Interview. There will only be one available file to download in that folder, and that's the packet that you'll need today. So once again, if it's available to you, I highly encourage you download that file and either have it printed and in front of you or digitally available for the remainder of this session. So at this time, please feel free to pause the video and take a few minutes to access the materials for today's session. Awesome. So now at this point, hopefully you've all had a chance to access those materials. You have your student handout packet ready. So with that, I would like to jump into our agenda for the day. So this session will cover aspects of the interview process. So first we'll talk about what is career readiness, what does that look like? Then we'll focus in on articulation and clarity, which is a huge skill set when presenting yourself in an interview, but also active listening is a component along with effective collaboration. So these are all some pieces, skills that are necessary when in those interview spaces. We'll also talk about the interview process from start to finish. So before the interview, during the interview, and after the interview, some tips and tricks and best practices to help you be successful. And then last but not least, we will jump in to a helpful tool that you all have access to as Pima Community College students called the Big Interview, which will help you bring your interview prep to even the next level. So what is career readiness? In order to lay the foundation for the rest of our session today, I do want to talk about career readiness because it does go beyond just having technical skills. Career readiness is about developing key professional qualities that lead to your long-term success. So employers are not just looking for candidates who know the job, they also are looking for employees who can communicate, who can collaborate, and adapt in the evolving workplace. So today we'll explore how you can showcase these qualities specifically in an interview setting. Now, NACE, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, which is for short NACE, has identified several career readiness competencies. I like to call these power skills that bridge the gap between your academic learning and your workplace success. So why are these important? Employers seek candidates, like I said, who are not only knowledgeable, but are also able to apply their skills in real world situations. So, according to NACE, if you are all able to demonstrate these competencies, especially when you're in interview settings and eventually, hopefully, in the workplace setting, it does enhance your career opportunities and professional growth. So, what are these power skills? On this slide, these are the 8 competencies or power skills that NACE has identified um, as the top 8 that employers are looking for when determining whether someone is successful or will be successful in the workplace. And we aren't going to go through all of these today. We will focus on 2 specific competencies during the course of this presentation. Now, that's not to say that you might not see some overlaps in other areas, as I do think a lot of the content that we develop as our employer engagement and career services team can dip into several of these buckets. The 2 that we're really focused on for our interview skills workshop today are communication and teamwork. So the reason I tell you this now is just so you can have these competencies or power skills in your head as we're working through the rest of the presentation, so you can hopefully see how all of this ties together in your career readiness journey. Awesome. So, one of the most important aspects of an interview is how you present your thoughts clearly and effectively. So, right now, we're going to jump into articulation and clarity, specifically in an interview setting. I like to think of interviews as your opportunity to market yourself. So, you are really just trying to sell a product. You're trying to convince an employer that you are the best fit for whatever it is that they are looking for. And in order to do that, you want to make sure that you follow a structured format to present yourself clearly and articulately. Um, that format is very simple. This might look similar to a format when you're writing an essay for one of your classes. You have your introduction first, which gives you an opportunity to briefly introduce who you are. Then I recommend sticking to 2 or 3 key points. So, what do you really want this employer to know? And do you have supporting examples for those key points? So, these should be targeted directly for whatever position you're applying for, things you're particularly proud of, or really those things that you want to make sure that by the end of the interview, you have gotten across to the employer. And then finally, you want to make sure that you summarize again to make sure that everyone understood what you were trying to say and end with a strong closing statement. What is the last thing that you want to leave your interviewers thinking about as they end the interview and move on with the rest of their day? Some of you may be familiar with the STAR method. That is something that I think is really, really helpful, particularly in interview spaces. STAR is just a fancy way for us to remember situation, task, action, and result. And this is a very common format or method framework that is used when answering questions in an interview setting. And if you can follow this framework when answering questions, I think it helps to keep you on track, make sure that you're sharing all of the relevant information, but also make sure that you're not getting lost along the way, which can lead to some rambling answers, or maybe they lack that clarity piece. So for situation, you really want to describe the context. This is your ability to set the scene so that whoever's interviewing knows exactly where it is you were and what you were doing. Task, you explain your role in this given scenario. Action is the detailed steps that you took. And the result is the outcome. How did it end up? Share the positive result of the action steps that you took. I think it's a little bit easier to learn by example. So I did want to provide an example of a STAR method in action. So, for example, say you are in an interview and the question you're asked is share an example of a time when you faced a difficult problem at work. How did you solve this problem? A way in which you could respond to this question could be, and I'm going to break it down by each of the star sections, the situation. Let's say, for example, I was working as a retail manager at a department store during the holiday season. A customer purchased a product online and had it delivered to the store. One of my team members or associates accidentally put the product out on the floor where another customer immediately purchased it. So in this situation, we've set the scene, provided the context. Now for task. I knew I needed to make this right for the customer to meet my own service level standards and to uphold the reputation of the company. For action, before calling the customer to let them know about the mistake, I located the same item at another store location nearby. I ordered it to be delivered to the customer's home along with a gift card to thank them for their understanding. And the result, the customer was so thankful that they wrote a 5-star review on several review sites. So that's just one example, made up scenario, but just so that you can further see how the STAR method would work in action for a specific interview question. Now, as important as it is to talk about yourself and to make sure that you're selling yourself successfully in an interview setting, I think a piece that is often overlooked and also a very important skill is active listening. Interviews are not just about answering questions, they're also about listening effectively. And active listening involves maintaining eye contact and body language that shows that you are listening and engaged. This might be nodding occasionally, listening before responding. So making sure that you aren't interjecting or interrupting, that you're listening to what others have to say prior to formulating your response and responding. This might also look like paraphrasing for clarity. One, just to reinforce that you have heard and understood, but also make sure that you are on the same page as those others that are in the interview setting. And then lastly, asking thoughtful questions is another way to show your active participation and listening in an interview setting. So an example of a thoughtful question might be, say you're in an interview setting and the question is, how do you handle conflicts in a team setting? You might ask, great question. Just to clarify, are you referring to conflicts with peers or conflicts with leadership? So that shows that you are listening to the question, but you're also just wanting to make sure that you are on the same page and clarifying what it is that your interviewer is looking for. Another skill that is incredibly important and valued by employers is teamwork and collaboration. When discussing past experiences, these are just some things that you may want to highlight to help show or illustrate your effective collaboration in action. So maybe your ability to work in a team setting, how you adapt and resolve conflicts, your respect and open-mindedness for diverse perspectives, but also your leadership and support skills. An example question that you might receive that's trying to get at and understand your collaboration skills might be, describe a time you worked in a team to achieve a goal. Some tips, tricks, best practices for answering this question might be mentioning how you contributed, how you resolve challenges, how you help the team succeed, and utilizing that STAR method that we went through to formulate those answers. All right, so we've started by identifying some key skills that are really important to hone in on when you're preparing to go into an interview process. But now I want to talk about the interview process itself, some tangible things that you can do before, during, and after your interview to enhance your level of success. Preparing for an interview involves several key steps. The very first is self-reflection. You really want to make time to identify what your skills are and even your areas of opportunity. What is it that you still don't feel confident in, that you feel like you might need to work on some more? But also identify things that you're particularly proud of, achievements, um, and passions. What are your core values? These are all things that you want to make sure you feel very confident in going into an interview so that you're able to articulately represent them, but also ensure that your core values align with the values of the organization that you're interviewing for. If you haven't already, I would highly encourage you to check out the recorded version of our Kickstart Your Career Journey workshop from January of this semester, spring 2025. There are some activities in that workshop where we talk about identifying those core values and also do some goal setting personally and professionally using those values. So if you can come back to those values, I think it helps center this self-reflection piece. It's also important to study the company's mission, their values, any recent updates that they have. This gives you an opportunity to not only show that you've done your research, but also, again, to make sure that your values will align with the values of the organization, because that can lead to higher levels of satisfaction if you do end up landing the role. It's also really important that you prepare questions to ask during an interview. Now, I've been a part of many, many interview processes on both sides, both as the person being interviewed and also as the facilitator of the interview. And every interview space that I have been in, there has been some space open-ended, generally at the end of the interview, for the candidate to ask questions of their interviewer or interviewers. And you want to make sure that you're prepared for this space, that you're able to ask thoughtful questions. This also shows that you've done your research and that you care about the role that you are interviewing for. And last but not least, you want to make sure that you're prepared with your personal brand. Part of this is dressing to align with the company's culture, but taking the care in how you present yourself. We get questions a lot about how to dress for an interview. And this is a really tricky question. And the reason for that is there is really no one size fits all in terms of how to professionally represent yourself when dressing for an interview. It really depends on the organization, the company, the employer that you are interviewing for, their dress code, their expectations, but also who you are as an individual and how you like to represent yourself. So while there's no one size fits all answer, my recommendation would be to do your research on the company. Generally, when doing your research, you're able to get a sense for what the company's culture is so that you can dress in a way that matches that while also being true to who you are. Sometimes in your research, you may even find what the employer's dress code is, and that's a really good way to know how you should prepare in terms of dress. But if you have any other specific questions about your situation, please feel free to reach out to our team and we'd be happy to help you prepare a little bit more specifically. So during the interview, some of these things may look familiar, as the first one, active listening. We have talked about this already. So this is how this all kind of ties together. You want to make sure that you're maintaining your focus, that your body language indicates that you're attentive, nodding when appropriate, asking for clarification. You also want to make sure that your body language says that you are engaged, so maintaining eye contact, but also not being robotic, right? Interviews can bring up a lot of nerves. They're not the most comfortable places in the world, but you also want to show up as who you are, and try to be natural and authentic as best as you can, while also understanding that some nerves might be at play here. So, nodding when it feels natural to you, smiling when it feels natural to you, really just doing your best to be comfortable in who you are and representing how you would like to. You also want to tailor your answers to highlight how your specific skills align with the job requirements. Part of this goes back to doing your research, making sure you have clear understanding of the job description for the role that you are interviewing for, and being prepared with examples from your personal experience that help align or illustrate how you would be successful in the role. And last but not least, ending strong. Thanking the interviewers for their time and just reiterating why you are interested in the role and you think you would be a good fit. So you've prepared for the interview, you've done the interview. Now there's a couple more steps after the interview. The first thing, celebrate that you made your way through the interview. That is a huge win. Then you want to make sure to follow up. This is just the extra kind of checkbox that I think sometimes get missed, but can really set you apart from other candidates that are in the pool. I firmly believe that sending a thank you email within 24 hours does show that you are grateful for the opportunity to interview, but also just reinforces that you are invested in the process. After you've done your follow-up, this is another opportunity for you to do some self-reflection. So you start your prep with self-reflection, but it doesn't end there. You also want to think critically about your performance in the interview and maybe note areas that you think you did really well and note some areas that you maybe think you could have improved, or maybe questions that you have for our team to come back so that you can be better prepared for your next interview. And then the last piece is recording, logging the details of the interview. What questions did they ask you? What responses did you give? Just so you can refer back to this. Often interview processes will have multiple rounds of interviews. So the better that you can record what your first experience was like, the more prepared you can be for maybe a second round interview for that same organization. Okay, so at this point, we have talked about career readiness. We've talked about some skills that are important when thinking about preparing for interviews. And then we've talked about the interview process. That's a ton of information. So I do want to take some time to do a self-guided activity where you can maybe put some of what we've just talked about into practice on your own to help reinforce some of these concepts. So if you are able to access the student handout packet, the first page of your packet has an activity, and the instructions are listed both on the top of the packet and on the screen, but I'll also go through them verbally as well. We are going to do a common interview questions activity. So read through the questions in your student handout packet and choose one question from each of the categories. So your packet will be broken down into different categories of questions. So general questions, ones that are job specific, et cetera, et cetera. So choose just one question from each of those categories. After choosing your one question from each category, think about how you might answer that question based on your own experiences, skills, and background. I also challenge you to consider some real life examples that show your strengths and how you handle different situations. Once you've taken some time to reflect, in the spaces provided, so you'll have a little box underneath each of the sections. So in those provided spaces, write as complete an answer as you can to each question that you've selected. Try to keep your answers clear and concise, and you may even want to organize your answers using the STAR method to make your responses even more structured and impactful, but also give you an opportunity to practice that STAR method in writing. I think the more times that you practice the STAR method in writing, the easier it will be to actually practice that STAR method verbally in an interview setting. All right, so at this time, I encourage you to pause the video, take 7 to 10 minutes on your own to complete this self-guided activity, and then we will come back together in a few moments. To end today, I do want to provide one more excellent resource that you all have access to as PIMA students that can help you take your interview prep to even the next level. So we have a resource called Big Interview. It's a valuable online tool where you can practice mock interviews and help refine your responses, all on your own. Um, to access Big Interview, you can access it through My PIMA. Under the Student Resources tab, there's a Career Resources option. And on that Career Resources page, there will be a button for Big Interview. You can click on Big Interview. If it's the first time you've accessed the site, it will ask you to set up your account and profile. And it's relatively easy. You just need your PIMA email address, and then you can start practicing. The cool thing about this platform is there's a library of online study videos that break down different areas where you might need support with interview prep. So, for example, one of the interviews is how do I answer the question, tell me about yourself? That's a very common interview question that a lot of folks struggle with because it's so open-ended. There's actually an online lesson that's created by professionals in the field that gives you some tips and tricks and best practices for answering that question in an interview. So you can do some self-guided online learning lessons, but you can also do mock interviews. There's an option to have Big Interview ask you a question, and then you can record yourself answering that question so that you have a recorded version that you can play back for yourself and give yourself some feedback. So you may notice something when you're recording yourself that you didn't notice when you were answering the question live. For example, maybe you used a lot of filler language like ums and uhs, and you want to practice taking meaningful pauses instead. You may have noticed that your answer was a little long-winded, and you might want to try and use the STAR method to help you articulate and clarify without so much rambling. So those are just some examples of how the tool can be used to help you when preparing for an interview. We will have a resource on our website that goes through Big Interview in a little bit more detail, and I will tell you how you can access our EECS website here momentarily, just to give you some additional resources and support if and when you are interested in utilizing this tool. So there are many ways to connect with us. The best way to connect with our EECS team is by exploring our website, careerservices.pima.edu. This is our landing page for all of the services that we offer. There is a ton of good information in there you can look more closely at the NACE competencies. You can get some resume building help, help writing cover letters, your LinkedIn profile. There's another resource for interviews there, Big Interview, like we just talked about. But also along the bottom of our website are all the different links to get connected with us. So LinkedIn, which is also listed on the screen here, our email address, careerservices@pima.edu, as well as our PCC Career Services page on Pima Engage, which is where all of our events live, so that you can check out when we will be hosting live events on campuses if you are an on-campus student. It also links out to our YouTube channel, which you already know where that lives. That's probably how you accessed the video today, but all different ways to connect with us. And like I said, I would really start at that website as your landing page to get you to all of the other resources that we have. With that, I would really like to thank you all for your time and attention today during the AC interview workshop. I hope you gained some valuable insights and feel more prepared for your next interview. But just remember that practice does make perfect, and our team is here to support you every step of the way. So if you do have specific questions or you want some more one-on-one support preparing for an interview, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Send us an email, careerservices@pima.edu, and we are happy to help provide more one-on-one support. Best of luck, and we look forward to seeing you next time.